Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In his short essay, The Last Messiah, Peter Wessel Zapffe is going to discuss four what he calls suppression mechanisms, and these are what allow us to not realize our own human condition, because if we did, we would be in a very bad state, something that he is going to call cosmic panic. And one of them that he's going to discuss at considerable length is what he terms diversion, but we could also call distraction, right? And instead of just ignoring things, which is what the first one does, or focusing on like social norms and surrounding ourselves with stuff, instead we change the contents of our consciousness, you might say, by changing what it is that we're focusing on. So he defines it as keeping our field of vision within acceptable bounds by keeping it busy with a ceaseless stream of new impressions. Now, that's very visual, perceptual language. It's clear that he doesn't mean it in just that sense. This is metaphorical. So what are we doing? We are occupying our consciousness and keeping it from becoming hyper-conscious, becoming aware of the futility of it, by bringing in more and more a stream of new things to occupy ourselves with, right? And he says, we've got some good examples of this. It's a typical dodge in childhood. Without diversions, a child can't stand himself. Now, I don't know whether this is true as a generalization, but kids do get bored fairly quickly. And he talks about babysitters, and we might want to think about parents as well, who, are going to distract them by becoming virtuosos at diversion. And some people don't even necessarily have to do it that much. They can just turn the kid over to the technology, put an iPad in their hand and let the apps do the work. Or earlier in my generation, you'd plunk the kid down in front of the TV and let them watch TV constantly. And that actually did happen to some kids. Now, that would be a case of diversion in this case, right? He also talks about the entire lifestyle of high society essentially being forms of diversion. You got more money? Well, you can have a greater range of diversions, including worrying about your money. That could also occupy your mind. What mutual fund do I need to invest it in? Perhaps I'd do better investing it in bonds or whatever it's going to be. But you think about all the things that go into what he calls the lifestyle of high society: consumption, showing yourself at galas and hanging out with other people in high society, caring what people wear at the Met Gala. I mean, that's kind of a funny thing. Being one of the people who reports on it or talks about gossip. Yeah, that could all be diversion as well. And he's got this nice metaphor. It can be compared to an airplane built of the earth but able with self-contained energy to hold itself in the air as long as the energy is maintained. It must always be moving forward because the air can only support it for an instant. If the pilot becomes lazy and secure from habit, that's okay. But once the engine misfires, the crisis becomes acute. So, decent analogy there. And he says that as opposed to some of the other suppression mechanisms, this is often conscious. We say to ourselves, what can I do to take my mind off of things? What can I do to keep myself from being bored and then moving from that boredom into an awareness of the genuine human condition? He calls this a need to divert attention from ourselves. And he doesn't just mean looking at yourself in a reflexive way, thinking about your own actions or things like that, but also taking the focus off of you as a conscious being, moving your consciousness onto other matters. Why do we need to do this? He says, because despair can lie just under the surface in a catch of breath or a sudden sob. We're always at risk of falling into despair or cosmic panic. Then he talks about some problems with this that exist for certain people. So what happens when you run out of diversions, or the diversions don't seem to have the same effect? And I've got a great example of this. Anybody who has spent a lot of time on their phone or their laptop or their smart TV, endlessly scrolling through the myriad choices we now have on these different apps that connect to streaming platforms of various sorts, considering whether they want to watch this or this or this, reading descriptions, and feeling like, I've already seen that kind of show. It doesn't have great reviews. I don't know if I want that sort of streaming content right now. And you're bored, right? You're listless. You are managing to distract yourself for a little while, but eventually you're going to be like, there's nothing to watch. And now think about that idea. We used to say that back when a television had maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 if you're in a major metropolitan area, channels that you could tune into. And then cable came along, and people would say, 175 channels and nothing on. The distraction or diversion is no longer working. Now we have more content than we could possibly view in 100 lifetimes available to nearly all of us, with just a couple, actions on our part, and we're still sometimes bored. So the exhaustion of diversion. What happens when the diversions have been exhausted? He says we end up in a kind of spleen or peevishness. So peevishness is a kind of, irritability, not high level where we're really losing our temper, but we just don't feel okay. We're not yet conscious of the despair that's waiting in the corner for us, but we can proceed to that. He says this ranges from a mild sulk, being sulky, right? This sucks, right? I'm bored, to deep depression, a depression that can lead us to despair once we become fully aware. He also goes on and talks about punishment of prisoners. Now, prisoners will also seek out all sorts of distraction, right? But if you're stuck within a cell, think about solitary confinement, and you don't have anything, then you're confronted with the situation of your life. He says, a central aspect of punishment by imprisonment is that most opportunities for diversion are denied the prisoner. And there being few other means for protecting oneself against angst, prisoners are for the most part constantly on the brink of utter despair. And, in American prisons, barring being in solitary confinement or in a level 5 facility with so-called SHU, right? You actually have a lot of possibilities for diversion. You can get involved in gambling or arguments with people or drugs or all sorts of other things. And this is actually how a lot of conflicts take place. So he goes on and he talks about something that he calls a no man's land in proximity to despair. So not quite complete despair, but on the edge of it. And he says it can be kind of a death zone. In them, life can continue only under great duress. You have to constantly work at it. Death offers you a way out. It could be an escape. But you can also use death as another form of distraction. And he says some people manage to build up a proper death, ringing elegies, a glorious last stand, the whole bit as a final diversion, so that there can really be fates worse than death. Newspapers, with their gentle obituaries, are a mechanism for social suppression. They always manage to find a soothing explanation for a death that was really due to despair. Here's the funny example he gives. It was thought the deceased took his own life because of the sudden fall in the price of wheat on the commodities market. And Zapffe says, when somebody kills themselves, it's out of a despair, and it's a natural death resulting from spiritual causes. They're aware of the meaninglessness of life. He then talks about changes, and this might seem to be a little bit different than distraction, but what he's talking about here is another dynamism for distracting ourselves. He tells us that few people can survive arbitrary, meaningless changes in their situation, whether it's a change of job, change in social life, or a change in the way they relax. What we want as human beings, and the more spiritually developed we are, the more we want this, is continuity, direction, and progression in the changes. And this leads to another aspect of this, which is that we aim at making progress. We're never quite finished with the distraction that we were working for. He says no situation can be ultimately satisfying. They must always go a step further, gathering new information, pursuing a career. And he says these people suffer from an ineradicable yearning to overstep limits, to demand more and more from life. So they distract themselves by getting the promotion at work, and now what do? They need to get the next promotion. Or they distract themselves by making $1 million. Okay, now you need to make your next million, or $1 billion, or whatever it's going to be. And he notes that this is not really that satisfying. The more that you do, the less the payoff is going to be. He tells us that the absolute height of one's goal is less important than how much higher it is from where one momentarily finds oneself. It's the marginal degree of yearning that counts, and we end up finding that no progress is truly satisfying, but there's no end to progress. And he says, human yearning means not just longing after something, but longing to be saved from something, that despair that we could feel, right? Whether we are at the moment, wherever we are at the moment. And then he makes a shift, which is going to sort of bring this discussion to a close. He says, if we use save or salvation in its religious sense, that is what characterizes the religious experience. He says, we are, looking for religion to satisfy a certain need, a need to distract ourselves or divert ourselves from the actual condition that we're in. But it also winds up being an escape. So he's going to tell us nobody's ever managed to explain what it is they are longing after in religion. It is clear what they're trying to escape from, this earthly veil of tears, one's untenable existential situation. If becoming aware of this situation is the greatest truth our souls can reach, it's also clear why religion is thought to be a fundamental need of human beings, to avoid that, to distract or divert ourselves away from that. And religion, offers a lot of different possibilities. You can always incorporate a new practice. You could read a little bit more in the scriptures. You could, do something. You could have a new realization and thereby just keep distracting yourself from the human condition, as Zapffe
thinks that we have to, because if we don't, we're going to want to kill ourselves.